the two most mind-blowing findings that you brought to the public that are of such magnitude that I think are gonna eclipse every dissent in this context. Anyone who doesn't agree with the research should first go and try to disprove these two pretty solid pieces of evidence that you brought to the public. One is that the correlation between twins increases with time, doesn't decrease, because the only permanent effect in your life is your genes. It pushes you always in the same direction, and the environment tends to average itself out. That's a finding that you made that absolutely blew my mind when I discovered about it, and I was not expecting it. And I think as a second one, very related to this one, this is a quote exactly from your book, Blueprint. By 16 years of age, the correlation for intelligence was the same for adopted children and their biological parents as for children reared by their biological parents. The correlation between these adopted children and their adoptive parents, who share nurture but not nature, hovered near zero. These two facts are undeniable.
Well, I'm glad you caught that. You know, there are other bits of the book, though, that capture people similarly, but I think that's an interesting one because for lots of reasons, because you were surprised by that. And if I give a public lecture, it takes a while to get people to be surprised. But you say, well, no, if you're an environmentalist, you think the environment keeps piling up as you go through life. So the environment's surely more important. The older you get, the less genetics is important. But it's interesting that it's actually the other way around, especially for cognitive abilities. That's the one where it's the most solid. Really, the heritability of cognitive ability, intelligence, call it what you will. Some people say, well, you can't measure that. Well, you can, we could go into that. But let's just assume your audience accepts that we can measure IQ or intelligence. And I think it's really amazing to think that the heritability of intelligence is pretty low in infancy. It's hard to measure, but it's only like 20%. Childhood, though, when they go to school, about 40%. Adolescence, early adulthood, about 60%. And then in adulthood, it may be as high as 80%. And those are astronomically huge effects that in older people, 80% of the differences are due to inherited DNA differences, inherited in the first cell with which they began life. And then you say, how can that be? But the answer is not what people think, first off, that there are somehow genes coming on board as you go through life. That's a possibility. It's not true, though. Mostly genetic effects are continuous. That is, the same genes are working, but they're having more of an effect as you get older. And what could that be about? That's what you were alluding to. We call it genotype-environment correlation. The environment isn't out there happening to us. It isn't like what our teachers taught us. What it's about, the genetics, is it's making us select environments, modify environments, create environments correlated with our genetic propensities. Now, that's a highfalutin way of saying that people make their own environment. That is, so if you see really bright young kids, like we studied mathematically gifted kids, they see their world mathematically. They joke with their friends about mathematics. Their world, their experiences are mathematics. And so the way they use their environment to kind of snowball, foster their genetic propensities. You see that too. An easier one for people to understand is vocabulary. If you've ever tried to memorize vocabulary words because you want to do better on a vocabulary test, it's really hard to do because that's not the way we learn language. We learn it in context on the fly. And I really see it with my grandchildren. I mean, one of them is very verbally gifted. And from the start, she's always wanted to know about the nuances of words. Well, why did you use that word rather than this word? What's the difference between those words? And so it's not she's studying dictionaries. She's just picking up language. She's, I think, genetically predisposed to that. Whereas my other grandchildren, who cares? So what? You know what I mean. It's obvious then that girl is going to end up having a better vocabulary, being more verbally fluent, and that sort of thing. So it's a very important idea, though. It's, again, nature of nurture in some ways, that we're using the environment. It's not the environment out there affecting us. It's that we're creating experiences that make our genetic propensities flourish. And that's why, as you go through life, you're picking up more and more of those environmental differences.